Hey everyone, welcome to Artist Decoded. This is your host Yoshino, and you're listening to episode number 163 with Emmy Award winning director Christine Yuan. Commercially, she's worked for clients such as Mercedes-Benz, Reebok, Tiffany & Co., Prada, and Zara, to name a few. Her newest project, entitled Generation Gravity, is an episodic series that explores the way hairstyles are expressions of identity, a connection to culture and lineage, and at times it can also be an act of defiance. She went to China, Jamaica, Japan, and the US to shoot this project, so we talk about that a bit. You can also go to our website to check out all of her work, christineyuan.com. I've known Christine for about 5 years now, and I've had the opportunity to watch Christine grow into this creative powerhouse that she is now. I've always got the sense of curiosity, wonder, and appreciation of the arts from her as well. And we were able to reconnect recently because we were on a panel discussion with a mutual friend of ours and past AD guest, Andrew Thomas Wong. We talked about Christine's short film, DU, which she created around the same time when I met her back in 2015. We also talk about how running has played a significant role into creating a streamlined sense of discipline within her life. We then touch upon a book she loves by Murakami entitled What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. I love her insights here, and I think you all will highly enjoy this episode, so hope you like it. Before we begin this episode, please go to our iTunes page, leave us a review. It helps reviewers just like yourself to hear about this podcast, and it helps get the word out of Artist Decoded all around the world. So all the reviews really help, especially when it's added up and accumulated over time, and I would greatly, greatly appreciate that. Without further ado, here it is, Artist Decoded with Emmy Award winning director Christine Yuan. Hope you enjoy it. So much for coming on the podcast. I'm glad that we're able to finally do this. I mean, we've known each other for so long.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here. I know we've talked about it so much, so I'm glad it's finally happening.
Definitely. Yeah, me too. Mm-hmm. Me too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we've been friends for a while now, but I mean, it's always good to, I mean, it's not like we talk all the time, you know, so it's good to be able to like get little more tidbits of information and just, you know, we're all kind of like piecing together the puzzle of what makes people complex and just learning new information and, you know, gleaning some more information on people and stuff. So
yeah, I think what's really cool is like we've known each other for long enough where we've been able to see each other grow. Where like when I first met you, you were a photographer, and then like couple years later, you got the space in Little Tokyo, and then you started curating art, and then you started Artist Decoded, and you started championing other artists. I think that's really cool, like what you've done to bring community together.
Oh, thanks. No, I really appreciate that. And you know, you've been an active participant in that whole experience, and you know, coming out and supporting us and coming out to those shows. And you know, I was talking to Xander Tran, the host of that last panel that we were on with Andrew Thomas Wong, and yeah, I was just talking to him about how I've had conversations with both you and Andrew, and you know, I met you at a time when you were working for a company and you were trying to transition over to being a director full time, and I remember you and I sat down and we were talking specifically about that and trying to pick each other's brains on like how that was possible, and I was figuring out at the time too, you know, how to transition from being just a freelance photographer. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think the idea of just growth and also just seeing where, you know, you are now and, you know, with your work. And I was just watching one of your short films and just the concepts all coming together and, you know, watching the music videos and the commercials and everything coming together is really inspiring.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess how did we meet? Yeah. How did we meet?
We met at it was like some photo event at the Paramount Studios. I met you through Nolan.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
Paris photo.
Yes, yes, with Diane Jong as well.
Oh man, yeah, that's awesome. Diane's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that seems like
I know that was like a different time where we were all these like bright-eyed like artist, quote unquote like artists. We're trying to be artists. Like how do we do it?
yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, do you feel? I mean, now you're much more informed through experiences and things like that. But do you still feel that sense of wonder and imagination and that love and drive for the craft and still trying to figure things out? Like, what's your perspective on that?
Yes, I think that is like a very precious attitude to have towards whatever art form you are experimenting with or learning through. I think it's important to have that, still have that like love or passion behind what you're doing. Or, I mean, even if not love or passion, but like at least curiosity. I think I'm
Hmm.
still being driven by curiosity.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I mean, I get that sense from talking to you the other day about your recent excursions, ingraining this habit of running. And I think this month you're saying that you're doing 100 miles for the month, but you already surpassed that. And it's, in
Yeah.
the middle of the month, which is really interesting. Running 100 miles is no joke.
I know it's not a, I know it's like a time of quarantine though, where you feel empowered when you can just put on shoes and just run outside and like you like go far and you're like, wow, I didn't know I could cover this, like see my own city this way. And you find like little nooks and crannies that you hadn't seen before that you're like I basically ran onto the 110 freeway the other day. Like there's this little path on the side of the freeway and I didn't know that pedestrians can like walk or run alongside the freeway. I was like, I've lived in LA my whole life. I didn't know I could do this.
That's amazing. Yeah. Specifically, what made you want to get into running?
It was, I don't think it was like a conscious act at first. It was something where I was on a shoot actually last year in Shanghai and with my production company, Object and Animal, and the EP there, he's a runner. And he was like, hey, I'm going to go run at the Bund, which is, like the view to see, the iconic view of Shanghai is like the Bund, like a very touristy area. So he was like, I'm going to go run at the Bund. Like, do you want to come? And I was like, oh my God, I haven't ran since high school. I don't think I can run. He was like, come on, just try. So I went with him and just went for it. And by the end, he was like, look, we just ran 3 miles. And I was like, whoa, I didn't know I could do that. And then I was just like, since then, I wasn't an active runner, but anytime a friend or if I'm on a job and a producer wants to go work out that way, I'm like, yeah, I'll come. And then it slowly built over time. And then last year, my friends had this like 50-mile challenge to run 50 miles in a month. And I was like, oh, I'll try this. And I think that push of like, you need to hit this amount of miles is what drove me.
That's interesting. Yeah, because when I when I was listening to you say, "Oh, I just decided to do 100 miles this month," I was thinking to myself, "Man, I don't think I could do that." If I,
No,
just
it was like built up for sure. And then, like now there, usually I'm a swimmer, like I'll go to Glassell Park and swim, but now the public pools are closed, like the gyms are closed. So like running seems like the only option for me, at least right now, in this time of quarantine.
hmm. Yeah. And you were also talking about how you're reading this book by Murakami called What I Talk About When I Talk About Running,
Yes,
right?
it's extremely motivating because he's someone that didn't start writing until he was in his 30s, didn't start running until about the same time. So you have this middle-aged man like taking on these new hobbies and taking on this new profession, kind of late in the game. And
Hmm.
the dedication he has towards running, he just uses it as a metaphor for writing. And it's like, you feel really accomplished when you get up and you get out there and you run like 3 miles or 5 miles that day. It's like, okay, that's enough for me to have done that day to feel like I've done something. And it sort of just frees your whole day up mentally and physically after that, where I don't know, it just like kind of sparks a fire under your butt or something. Where you don't feel you
Mm,
feel like good.
hmm. Totally.
Yeah.
But do you think that, because I have this sort of philosophy that I've been juggling with about this idea between certainties and uncertainties. So the certainty aspect is could be, you know, metaphor essentially for physical activities, because you understand that there's a set goal to accomplish and you can reach that goal within that day. And then the
Hmm.
uncertainties are like if you do something as in writing and you don't know where that's going to go. So to be able to
Right.
balance yourself out mentally and then physically, to be able to balance yourself out with both certainties and uncertainties. Do you ever think about that?
Yeah, I think about that in terms of control. Like, okay, a lot of things in our lives right now we cannot control, we don't have control over, and that can be mentally very scary. But like something like physical exercise, like my diet or working out, that's something that can be in my control. So why don't I take control of that? Like I think control can manifest itself in negative ways, and this is like a healthy positive way to channel that part of your
Mm,
personality, because it's definitely part
mm,
of my personality, which I think makes
mm,
me like a good director. But
mm.
yeah, it's like learning how to channel that into a healthy way.
Yeah. I mean, I think being in control is kind of almost part of the job as being a director,
Hmm.
because everyone's on set looking at you for decisions.
Hmm.
And I mean, do you feel that way? Like being a director, that do you feel that most directors that you know have a certain need for control?
I think it's more like you're the compass that's guiding the ship. So yeah, it is, less like, for lack of a better word, control. Like you're in control of the vision. You're in control of like knowing where this is going. Like not only in production but in the edit. Like you're in control of the bigger picture. So you're like it's your job to guide everyone else in that same direction, like within the same vehicle.
Have you always been a natural leader?
Um, I don't know because I've always been a natural loner. So I don't know if I've always been
What do you mean? What do you mean
like
by that? What do you mean?
like like growing up I was always sort of a loner. Like I never like in high school there were like friend groups, and I was always the person that bounced around the friend groups. I never had like a set group of friends that I was always with. I like to travel between different social circles. And like in
Mm,
that way I feel like I was kind of a loner. And like also my art form growing up was painting, so I was like art for me was an expression, like a singular expression of the self. So a huge part of filmmaking was learning collaboration. I think that was like a huge turning point, is like learning how to
mm.
collaborate with other people. That was like something very new to me in when it comes to like art and expression.
Do you still paint on your downtime?
I don't paint anymore. Yeah, it's like kind of sad, but no, yeah, I have not gone back to painting. No.
Do you think there's a need there for you to want to explore that area, or do you think you get that more for, you know, the singular expression sort of thing from the writing process?
Yeah, I think like painting was just the gateway drug. Like they say weed's the gateway drug. I feel like painting was the gateway drug. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like this is like a way to express yourself externally. But then now with filmmaking, like I love the collaborative aspect of it, because when I work with other people that I really respect and admire, and I'm like, wow, they're totally elevating this vision. And like that's something that I'm really stimulated by, like constantly when it comes to like the process of making like a film or a video or commercial or music video.
Do you think there's something that changed within you to be able to want to collaborate more with people as opposed to doing something, an art form singular, such as painting?
I think it goes hand in hand with like where you are mentally in life, and like I feel like I grew up as an only child, so a huge struggle of mine as I like entered adulthood was this idea of like the individual versus the collective. And I think like it kind of just came with like maturing and being like, okay, you're not this rebel that's alone in the world. Like there's people around you that love you, that want to like, help you. And I think
Mm.
like collaborating within filmmaking kind of like went hand in hand with that personal journey of like being open to others.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting too because we were talking before about this idea of the individual versus the collective, and how you were saying how, working on projects in America, it's very much individualistic, which I think is ingrained within our culture and Western culture, and within capitalism. It's, this idea of meritocracy, and also, people like we were talking about before, people are trying to get to the next level, whatever that may mean, for individual success. But when you were working in China, you were saying that there's more of a collective hive mind sort of a feeling, right? And
Yeah.
where everything is kind of like a well-oiled machine. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, like yeah, I think like when I first worked in Shanghai, I was just so amazed by how little I had to verbally communicate in order to like have everyone see what I was seeing. It was like they understood what I was saying immediately. And I didn't have to over explain myself, or they got it. And like I feel like on set there's just this, because everyone kind of fits into their department very neatly. There's I don't want to say like a hierarchy, but there's definitely order. There's like order and disorder when you shoot in China, where like sometimes there's no one's on talkies, everyone's yelling, and like people, they don't have ladders. They're like literally like scaling the lights, like, like 30 feet high in the air. It's like it's chaos if you're just looking at it from the outside, but like once you're inside of that and you're like inside of the culture, you see how like there's order in the disorder. And yeah, I don't know. It just maybe because it like for me that was like a way to actively reconnect with my culture, and that's what made even just like down to speaking the language of Chinese. And that's what made it seem so organic, because I felt like I was touching like this root of who I was that I wasn't able to express here in the States. It's not saying like one place is better to shoot than the other, but it was just like a really refreshing experience. And like I remember at the end, like I was shooting this Zara commercial in Shanghai, and we wrapped. It was like a really hard day. It was a 3-day shoot, and the last day it was like 4 a.m. It was super cold. It was in December, and at the end of the day, we wrapped, and I gave like the art director a hug. And I was just like, thank you so much. Like, you did such a good job. And then he went to my production designer afterwards and was just like, I can't believe the director like acknowledged me. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, you're part of the team, But it's like one of those things where they're so used to like a set of hierarchy where, that I'm not, that I feel like I tend to like try to break or neutralize and like bring this energy on set. We're like, look, we're all here trying to do the same thing. We're trying to create this really dope shit. Like, I don't see it as a hierarchy. I see it as like we're all putting our energy into collaboration, and it's like the same.
You're kind of bringing, it's almost like this nuanced Western perspective to Eastern culture. Mm-hmm. And I mean, that's exactly what you are, is, your amalgamation of both. Right. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, like, did you grow up in China or did you grow up in the States?
I grew up in the States. I grew up in a like largely Caucasian suburb. And I didn't actually go to Asia until I was like 20 or something. Like late, I like didn't go to Asia for the first time till later in my life.
But you grew up learning Chinese as a kid.
I grew up learning Chinese through my grandma, who largely raised me because my mom was a single mom who had to work. So my grandma, like after school, I would be at my grandma's house. In the summertime, I'd be with my grandma, and my grandma did not speak any English at all. So that's how I learned the language.
Can you speak a little bit more about those experiences? I mean, how was it, having your grandma raise you as your mom was working, and like, what did you learn throughout that time period?
I learned the power of Chinese soap operas. I learned
In what capacity?
just like how much time that a person can watch soap operas and like like my grandma never had a job. She like raised like five kids. So then when she ended up coming to America, it was like a largely domestic life. She led like her whole life was just in the house. So I learned like the power of ritual within the home, like how you can honestly spend the whole day cooking and cleaning and like tidying up, and it doesn't get old. It doesn't seem like a chore to her because it gives her it was like the purpose of her life. And that's not like a bad thing. It's just a different way of like looking at how you live life when you remove ambition or this idea of like success within like a capitalist society. Like I think I like from her, like I learned like the power of just like, washing dishes, and like it can be like a beautiful ritualistic thing instead of a chore.
Yeah, the power of simplicity.
Yeah, especially when it got later in her life, when she was in her 90s, my grandma was still living alone and like cooking and cleaning, and she was like 93. And I like watched her just like, like wash carrots and peel carrots, and that took like an hour. But it was like beautiful.
What did you find beautiful in it specifically?
Just like the contentness in that moment. Because sometimes, like, I feel like as a young person, when you see someone old, or like you're just kind of like, what are they living for? And it's like the things you start to live for in your older age become a lot more simple. And I think, like, in that simplicity, there's like beauty in it. Where, like, yeah, to us, like washing and peeling a carrot could take like 5 minutes, and it's something we don't even think of. But like for my grandma, it could be like her entire afternoon. It's just like this sense of purpose that I think like that, like as artists, like what's our purpose on this earth? But maybe it doesn't have to be that complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, totally. Yeah.
Like,
No, I mean, I know, I agree.
yeah,
I agree with you.
it could be as simple as just like washing and peeling a carrot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting, like, going back to this idea of meritocracy and how it's been slowly ingrained in us ever since we were kids in Western society to be accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
But I think sometimes that those accomplishments get in the way of us reaching any sort of happiness or contentment or appreciation for the things that we're currently doing, and a certain presentness as well. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's like about a balance. It's like, I feel like that's what I'm learning too now during this time of this pandemic and quarantine. It's sort of like you're forced to stop working in some ways. And I think that's okay. Like, it's like balancing the moments where you can be present, like whether that's like exercising or cooking or cleaning. But then also it's like we're also young and we have the privilege based off the sacrifices of our parents to, hustle and try to accomplish whatever it is we want to accomplish. Like, I think it's like within reach if you want to go for it, but it's like the balance of the two perspectives.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like just trying to stay present. And I think that's like a very difficult thing, especially when you're on set, especially when, 50 different things are coming at you and you need to make decisions and things aren't going right. It's like, that's something I'm learning too, is just like, how do you stay grounded and present in those moments?
Is there anything specific that you do to stay grounded and present?
Yes. And it's like just breathing, like starting to focus on your breath, like inhale, like bring your breath up to your third eye, and then like exhale out your mouth. Just like something as simple as becoming conscious of your breath can like help ground you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And going back into your work, this idea of purpose and not having a purpose. And, I think that is what leads to a lot of people's unhappiness and potentially a symptom of being depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I was watching your short film, and let me know if I'm saying this incorrectly, Do You?
Mm-hmm.
It very much felt like that woman is going under this physically. It seemed that she was caught in a purgatorial state where she's counting down these what would seem to be days in our reality, but the surrealness of the situation, it's almost like in contrast to life, just people in general can be in their own purgatorial state. And I'm
Yes.
curious where that idea stemmed from and what you think about it now that you've had some time to process that
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, that so DU was a short film I made when I was very much in that state of mind. Like I had just graduated from college. I was like trying to figure out how to make money, like how to, pursue directing, but being financially able to do that. Because when you start out as a director, you're not, it's hard to get out there and like be financially stable in the beginning. So like I made that. I was in a very transitory. Like I was in a transitional
Transitionary?
space. Yeah, transitionary space. Like and like I
Yeah.
just basically just graduated from college, like moved to East Hollywood, was like living like off of Hollywood Boulevard. Shit was gnarly. I was like, what is my life? Like, I feel like I'm in a version of hell, but it's in my own head. I'd just broken up with like my boyfriend at the time, and I was like a newly independent woman who was now out there in the world, like for real. Like, you don't have the crutch of school anymore to, there's no excuses. You're just like kind of plopped into the real world and you're like, okay, how am I going to survive? And like, who am I in this space? So like that short was driven by all those like circumstances. And then I'd also at the time gotten really into Kundalini yoga. So I grew up in a Christian school my whole life, and I won't,
Really
yeah, so like I don't
interesting.
consider myself a Christian, but I do have like a spiritual background. So at that time, like after, living in Hollywood and then having like no crutch around you, it's like I was experimenting like going back to church and then like going back to a Christian church. And then at the same time, I was exploring Kundalini yoga. And then I reached this conclusion where I'm like, these two things are the same thing. It's like these two things are like vehicles for spirituality, like whether that's chanting during Kundalini yoga or like singing praise during um, during church. It's like they're sort of taking you to the same place, which is a conversation with yourself. So yeah, I think that Dio was like in a large way a conversation with myself, trying to figure out all these things I had going on in my head, and like I was coming from like a very angsty place, and I felt in some ways like trapped in this purgatory or this hell of Hollywood that I was living in at the time. And like it's not in a negative way, but more in like it was like in a dark way, but in a dark way that I really enjoyed. Like that sounds weird, but it's
Hmm.
like, sometimes you see dark shit or dark movies and it's like I love this.
Speaking of just the attraction to darkness or the curiosity for, maybe you would consider it morbid curiosities, where do you think that comes from?
I think it's maybe comes from like being alone so much as a child, where you're like, like sometimes like I need to retreat to like a dark. I'm like I have this joke where I'm like I just need to like be in darkness and be alone, and like that's how I gain energy. It's like I think it comes from being like slightly an introvert,
Hmm.
where it feels like okay, out of the darkness I can like get energy from that.
And then sitting in that darkness and having time to yourself, are you able to process your feelings through things that you go through throughout the years?
Yeah, I think I mostly process that type of stuff when I go back and like read old writings or read old journals, and like I see things I've written maybe like 5 years ago that I still think the same, like I still have those same thoughts today, and I'm like, wow, like me 5 years ago knew what was up, but I didn't know it back then. But like now, like rereading those things, it's like you're always like, my friend Ari told me, like, when you make a piece of art, you kind of, or whether it's music or a video or a painting or photography, it's like you're sort of exploring the same themes over and over and over again. You're just like doing it in different ways. So it's like whatever your thing is, it's like you're exploring that through all the different things you're making. So yeah, I think like whether through writing or like the video pieces I do, it's like there's some sort of source soul that you're drawing from, that you're tapping into to create that thing. And that like that essentially is like yourself. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Do you think that people are naturally born talented?
Uh,
Do you think that talent can be learned? What's your take on that?
I think that there are people that are naturally born talented. It's funny because Murakami actually writes about this in the book, like what I talk about when I talk about running. Of like, yeah, there are people that are naturally born talented, but then at the same time, you can have someone that's very hardworking that isn't necessarily born talented, but if they're practicing their craft or whatever it is they want to practice, like they can get to that point. So I think,
Mm.
yes, like people are naturally talented for sure. But I also think that, like, if you're committed and if you have the right mentality and the right discipline, you can get to that level. Like, that's how I felt about running. I'm not a naturally talented runner, but I just was super committed and disciplined about achieving 100 miles in May. Yeah, I think that process, like, really taught me a lot. Like, you can kind of do anything you set your mind to, as cheesy as that sounds. But like, I feel like so much of what we do is like mentality, but that mentality is like bred out of privilege. It's bred out of education. It's bred out of experience. But it's still like a mentality, like, okay, I can go and make a short film. Like, that's like a mindset that you have that can take, like, because you either don't know any better or you can do it. Like, because you have that mindset, like people will follow that mindset to where you want to take it.
So, how do you balance this idea of imposter syndrome with having the courage to be able to actually do the thing that you set
Mm.
out to do?
I don't think imposter syndrome ever really like cripples me actually. It's just sort of the butterflies you get in your stomach sometimes before set or before you like have a meeting with a really big client. And like I think that largely comes from just excitement. And like I think that's good because like
Hmm.
it makes me feel like I'm still excited about what I'm doing. I still feel like new in this world. And like I think that's a good thing. But yeah, the imposter syndrome, I don't know if it's like, wanting to be humble or if it comes from this like kind of more timid Asian background I have. I'm not sure, but it's never truly crippling. It's just like it's a passing moment. It's like a passing feeling.
It's interesting because we all have friends and people that we know and have talked to that the idea of failure is completely overwhelming and
Mm-hmm.
frightening. And, for me, I just think of failure as an opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's not necessarily that I'm more courageous than someone else. It's just, like you were saying, sometimes it is about just being ignorant and ignorant of your inabilities at the time, but you push through somehow. And I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
I think, do you think failure is real? That's my question. Is failure an illusion? Because I feel like in some ways, like failure is an illusion. Like, yeah, for sure, there's things I've made that I'm not totally like proud of, that I'm not like publishing or sharing. But at the same time, like, I don't consider them failures. They're just experiments. And I think like the most important thing is just to like keep experimenting. like, I don't know, with failure, it's like, yeah, maybe in the beginning, if like no one responded to my videos and I wasn't able to like financially be independent based off what I do, then yes, I would consider that a failure. But I can't, I don't believe that. I think like if you just keep doing it, if you believe so much in yourself as whatever you want to be, like the people around you will have no choice but to believe the same.
Yeah, that reminds me of this book that I've read by Timothy Galway. It's called The Inner Game of Tennis, and it talks about this idea of, if you want to be a tennis player, you act like a tennis player, you walk like a tennis player, you go on, the I was going to call it a field, whatever you call it, the field, sure. Acting, like moving like a tennis player and emulating the movements of a tennis player. And, that can be equated to any sort of physical activity. It could be running. You understand how runners run and the technique behind it. And then you eventually become that, you will that into existence.
Yeah, we have the power to will things into existence. And that's what I mean by the mindset. I think like before you achieve anything, you need to like get your mindset right about it, or you need to experiment with it in order to get your mindset right about it. Like when I made DU, I was at the point where, I wasn't getting paid to be a director. It was like that was like the money that came like Dazed commissioned a film, and that was how that film was made. But like financially, I was working full time as like a graphic designer. And so I was in this place where I was like, well, I want to be a director, but like, how do I be a director? There's this gap here. Like, I don't know. I see where I want to go, but I don't know how to get there. And I think like through just finding ways of making things or finding any opportunity to make things, that was how I was able to bridge the gap. Even like I remember too, when I still had my full-time job, I would on the weekends or use any type of resources to make my own videos. And like the process of making those videos is what got me into the mind state of being like, okay, well, I can do this. And yeah, eventually like the world will see you how you see yourself.
What made you want to examine the idea of looking inward to be able to change certain aspects of yourself to will things into existence?
I think it like comes from like being called to be independent again. Like when you graduate from college, you're like, in your young 20s and you're trying to figure out how to be like an entire individual, like on your own without being like, I go to this school, or I'm dating this person, or like, it's like, who am I when like all these titles are stripped away from me? I don't know. That's like, I think it's like this idea of wanting to create substance in your own being. But that was just something I just really felt like I was pushed to do because I felt very like alone in the world when you're like transitioning to adulthood. Yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and being an only child has its certain obstacles as well that you have to traverse.
Yeah.
In terms of feeling alone and those sort of things.
Yeah, I think like early on in my work and in my life, and maybe even now sometimes, it's like I'm really driven by loneliness.
What do you mean?
Like, back when I made DU, or like you asked like why was I driven to look internally, it was just kind of like, well, like I often felt lonely. So it's like, why do I feel lonely? This feels bad. Like, why does it feel bad? And like learning to construct the tools around you, whether that's being present when you're cooking or when you're washing dishes, like things like that, to like ground you so you don't like disappear into like the ether of darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like it's different like with my boyfriend, for example. Like he's also a director, and he's like the type of person that just grew up in like a family of seven, like lived with roommates his whole life. After college, like had a directing collective, is like always surrounded by people. So it's like his experience is like way different than mine because he's he gets his
Mm.
energy from being with people. So this idea of loneliness is like something he like doesn't really, it's not something that like drives him because it's not something that he's like around that much. Like like especially being freelance, it's like you're used to like working alone and like yeah, that's just something that's like plagued a lot of my life, I think. Which is fine. It's not like a sad thing. It's like I think it's like it can be like motivating and you can find inspiration in that.
How do you tend to process emotions and feelings the best? Is it through writing shorts, or is it through writing in a journal, or is it through talking with someone about it? Is it an amalgamation of all those things?
Yeah, I think it is. Like I think like the most direct way is definitely journaling for sure. That's just like a really cool way to talk to yourself and then to like read back on that and like maybe it's something that you experience. It's like a recurring thing that you go through, which I
Mm-hmm.
find really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, yeah, like talking to your friends and then like they kind of just, it's not that big of a deal or, they kind of help put things in perspective for sure. Like my girlfriends.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious in terms of your approach to work, just to change gears a little bit, but what is your approach with doing a music video as opposed to a commercial, as opposed to a short or a film?
Mm. So if like like normally for commercials, they'll come to you with a script already written or an idea already written. So you're sort of building off that and you're often working with a creative director, which I actually really, really love.
Mm.
Like I love like, collaborating with people on things that they've already been ideating on and like, collaborating on how to elevate it or push it or take it in one direction or another. Like I like that. Music videos are a little bit different because you just kind of have the song and maybe there's like a really, really loose idea from the artist, but you're kind of building the world in like for me at least, it's like I'm building the world in my head alone in my room listening to the song.
Mm.
And it starts out with like a visual. And then you kind of build a world around that. And then with short films, it's kind of like, okay, well, what do I want to say right now? Like, what do I want to explore? Like,
Mm.
that's even more of an open space of like, okay, there's no song, there's no already written idea. It's just like, what is what is interesting to me,
Mm.
and like, how do I want to go about exploring it? Like with shorts, it feels almost maybe like you're exploring through the process of doing, and then with music videos, it's always it comes back to the song, and then with commercials, it's like how do I help expand on this idea that already exists.
Mm. So I want to switch gears again, and I want to talk about this idea that we were talking about the other day about approaching projects with more so of a sense of interest and not being so aware of, well, because we were talking about the other day about, a couple years back that there's an equal amount of, and there still is, of men that are chosen to be directors of feature film projects as opposed to women. And I think in 2016, I mean, there's just various like statistics, but I think it was like 96% of directors doing feature films, like major feature films, were men.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were also talking about this idea of gender fluidity, and it's more about your individualistic ideas about that. And can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that this is an interesting time because there's definitely call outs to the gender inequality in the film industry. And I think it's great that like it's getting attention and there are like active movements and initiatives to change that for sure. Like I think that's great. But then at the same time, I think we need to be careful about further separating the genders when we do that. I think like behind the scenes, like infrastructure wise, like yes, we should have more women, we should have more people of color behind the scenes, like writing the shows, like making decisions for sure. But like as a director, like I don't necessarily like to be categorized as like a female director. because I think that
Mhm.
like does a disservice to the work that I do. Like I don't think it should be seen through a different lens just because I'm a woman. Yeah, because it's like the ideas are the ideas, and they should just be on like the same playing field. Yeah, like these things with like ladies with lenses or like all these hashtags. I wonder if it's actually like servicing the cause.
Mhm.
Even though it's tricky though because you do need the call outs to push change for sure.
Mhm.
But you also don't want to like box yourself in. And that's just something I'm like conscious of. It's like I'm not like advertising myself as a female director. I'm just a director. Or even further than that, I'm just like a human, like trying to figure this out, like, trying to figure like the human
You're a human
experience out.
director.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a human. No, I'm not even like a human director. I'm just like a human trying to like figure out how to live their life with other people.
Yeah, yeah. With directing as a medium to convey an emotion or an expression.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Which I think is so cool about like the fluidity of like what you've done, like transitioning from photography to more of like curation. It's like, yeah, being open with what your interests are and like how that can change or expand.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you for saying that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, this is something that I think about all the time in terms of just personal interests and just like experimenting with life in general. I think is something that's really interesting. And I don't know. I guess the thing that I fear is being stagnant, and whether that's within a single medium or whether that is, just always having a zest for life is something that is truly interesting,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
For sure. Yeah, I
Yeah.
remember like when I was in high school, I used to like want to just be like a snowboarding instructor, or I mean, I'm not even a good snowboarder, but like having these like dreams of a different life that's like more rooted in nature and in like physical activity, like being like a white river rafting instructor or something like that, where it just is
Yeah.
like a much more like simple, it's or seemingly simple lifestyle.
Yeah. And, I think that it's good to be able to listen to yourself and trust yourself that you're going to make a good informed decision on what to do next. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's the most important thing, to adapt, to be adaptable, especially during times like this where, you know, being a director, I mean, like a lot of jobs aren't shooting right now.
Yeah,
And that could really be a huge weight on someone's ego, right?
yeah.
But what do you think about that right now? How have you been
Mm,
processing that?
I've been having like kind of my reaction has been actually like kind of positive, where I feel like it's been giving at least me personally a lot of space to think about like it kind of puts like a pause button on the hustle, and it puts things in perspective of like, okay, why are you doing the things you're doing, what's important to you, where do you want to go, and like are you being repetitive, or like are you doing things for like shallow reasons. It kind of like has put things in perspective for me in a positive way. And like the fact that we can't shoot, yeah, it sucks, but then also it's like thrown me more into development of like bigger ideas that I want to pursue.
Hmm.
And I think that's just been like a really positive outcome of this time. It's like it's been throwing me more into like writing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, where normally it's like I would be wanting to do that, but then it's like you're distracted by all these like emails about maybe this music video or maybe this thing or maybe this thing, which is amazing because like as a director you want opportunity, but sometimes like it's a balance again because like sometimes things are distracting. So it's like you're at the point where you're like figuring out like okay, what's a distraction or like what is gonna take me to my bigger goal.
Definitely. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot as well. Yeah. Just the idea of focus. But, yeah, I mean, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
And, it's good just to catch up with you and get your ideas on things. And, I'm glad that Xander was able to connect me, you, and Andrew into that panel discussion, because like, I don't know, I just like respect both you and Andrew and Xander
Mhm.
like a lot, you know, and
Yeah, it's super cool. I mean, this is like
yeah,
way
yeah.
more like feel like I don't know, abstract than I like this. I like talking about stuff like this. It's just like acid talk, you know? What is life? Like the purpose of life.
Yeah, yeah. I'm constantly examining that. I feel like I'm in my own etherical acid induced
Yeah.
comatic state of existence.
I mean, we're like lucky that we can have the space to like think about things like this. Because, yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. You know, yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks so much for doing this, and I guess I'll catch you on Zoom for a bit. You can
Yeah,
still do
yeah.
that, right?
Okay, cool. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay. All right. Music for the podcast is by Rarebit, aka Justin Dosher Hopkins. Editing assistance is by Noah Wainwright, and intern is Sam King.